Okay. So the book 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult was banned because of a couple of different reasons. There was a lot of cuss words and bad language towards the end of the book especially, and a lot of sex scenes too, with a girl's boyfriend. Also, for the violence, obviously, since this book is about a school shooting, so there, and it goes into detail from the perspective of the shooter. um, so it talks about like what was going through his mind when he did it and all that stuff. And a lot of teachers and parents don't want their kids to read about this kid getting bullied and stuff. And they also think that it could potentially give bullies ideas on how to bully other kids, and they didn't want kids to read about that. So that's the reason why it was banned and stuff in a lot of libraries. Okay, so I'm going to read from page 52. Yeah, it's right after the school, after the shooting, and they're at the police station. Captain, a desk sergeant said as Patrick walked into the station, and he slid his eyes toward the woman who was sitting across the room, coiled tight with purpose. That's her. Patrick turned. Peter Hewton's mother was tiny and looking nothing like her son. She had a pile of dark curls twisted on top of her head, secure with a pin. She wore scrubs and a pair of narrow gloves. He wondered briefly if she was a doctor. He thought about the irony of that first, too now. She didn't look like a person who created a monster, although Patrick realized she might have been caught but just as unaware by her son's actions as the rest of the community. Mrs. Hewton, I want to see my son. Unfortunately, you can't, Peter replied. He's being held in custody. He has a lawyer. Your son is 17, legally an adult. That means that Peter's going to have to invoke his right to attorney himself. He might not know what to do. He might not know. Her voice breaking. Patrick knew that, in a different way, this woman was a victim of her son's actions, too. He had interrogated enough parents and minors to know that the last thing he wanted to do was burn a bridge. Ma'am, we're doing our best to understand what happened today. And honestly, I hope you'll be willing to talk to me later to help me figure out what Peter was thinking. He hesitated and then added, I'm very sorry. He let himself into the inner sanctum of the police station with his keys and jogged up the stairs to the booking room with its adjacent lockup. Peter Hewton sat on the floor with its back to the bars, rocking slowly. Peter, he said, you all right? Slowly, the boy turned his head. He stared at Patrick. You remember me? Peter nodded. How'd you like a cup of coffee or something? A hesitation, and then Peter nodded again. Patrick summoned the sergeant to open Peter's cell and led him to the kitchen. He'd already arranged a camcorder running, so that if it came down to it, he could get Peter's verbal consent to his rights on tape to get him to talk. Inside, he invited Peter to take a seat at the scarred table, and he poured 2 cups of coffee. He didn't ask Peter how much he liked it. He just added sugar and milk and set it in front of the boy. And then I'm going to skip the photographs where they're just kind of talking and just kind of mumbling answers and not being very nice. I don't know. And then Patrick led Peter back to the holding cell and watched him curl up on the floor on his side, facing the cement wall. He knelt beside the boy, one last ditch attempt. Help me help you, he said. But Peter just shook his head and continued to cry. It wasn't until Peter had stepped out of the cell and turned the key in the lock that he heard Peter speak again. They started it. He whispered. So, Jodi Picoult had a very good purpose in writing this book. Since it jumps around in perspectives, so it shows all the different characters and like how they react to all the things that happen to them. It especially shows the shooter and Josie, who used to be a friend of Peter, that her boyfriend was killed during the shooting. And so it kind of shows both sides of the stories. And it's important because it shows a lot of what the kids at the school did to Peter and how they hurt him and how it all led up to him eventually not being able to take it anymore and taking guns to school and shooting people. So I think the purpose that she wrote this was to show high schoolers especially that what actions and say and the things that they do, they might not think about it right then, but it adds up and it affects kids' lives and it can ruin their lives. So I think that's the reason why she wrote it. I do not think that this book should be banned because of all the violence is actually it really isn't that bad. It's not that much of a book, and it kind of is important to the plot, so it's needed. And as far as the language, I didn't really find all that much of it, especially there was kind of some coming from Peter's perspective, but that's kind of to be expected since of all that he went through. And the only thing that I can see for a Big Bang book is the sexual scenes that were found towards the end of the book, because most of them were not needed for the plot at all. So other than that, I think it's a great book, and I don't think it should be banned.